Hello and welcome to the Chess Legacies lecture series. My name is Grandmaster Illia Nyzhnyk and I am your host today. Welcome everybody. Today I would like to present you a lecture on Emanuel Lasker's reign. I feel like Emanuel Lasker is a very unique world champion of the past because he would just destroy and rampage, and he was so good. He held the world champion title for a whopping 27 years, and I believe that he is definitely worthy of being made a lecture out of. And while looking at his at the history of his reign, I've noticed an interesting pattern. Emanuel Lasker seems to have done incredibly well beating people in matches. He also had amazing, astounding results in open and closed tournaments, but his match results were incredible. He would just erase his opponent from existence in a singular match, and that's what I found very interesting about his result history. So I would like to demonstrate four of his match games, where the focus of these four games will be mostly on his opening and endgame understanding, but also the last example will demonstrate how, if given a chance, he wouldn't miss out on an opportunity to attack his opponent, and he was also very good at it. So the first game comes from, this is arguably one of the most important games from his match for the world champion title against Wilhelm Steinitz, the world champion of that time. And in this game, I've included the entire game because this game serves as a reminder for myself. I have a personal pet peeve. This game happened in the opening known as Queen's Gambit declined, which is signified by these first couple of moves. The accepted Queen's Gambit would be if black had decided to take the pawn on c4, meaning that the black would be accepting the Gambit offer, taking the pawn. This game, however, black did not take the pawn on c4, and therefore this is called Queen's Gambit declined, as black has declined the Gambit offer. My personal pet peeve about this opening is that I have overwhelmingly negative results with white pieces against Queen's Gambit declined. For the love of me, I just cannot seem to figure out how to beat black in this opening, as the opening is incredibly sturdy. It has great reputation, even all the way throughout late 1800s and all of the 1900s. People have been playing Queen's Gambit accepted and Queen's Gambit declined religiously, and black seems to be showing great results in this opening. So consequentially, myself being unable to beat the opening with white pieces, I decided to include this game to kind of show myself a reminder of how it can be done. And in this game, Lasker went for a slightly less popular but still incredibly tricky line, where he ends up playing the move e3, which is not usual. So in this day and age, people prefer developing the bishop out early to either g5, which is the main move, as it would pin the knight, or to f4, as it would be a slightly less rare, but also a move that would be applying pressure in the future. This move is mostly played to apply additional pressure against the c7 pawn, and also to give white a better control over the e5 square. So these are the two most common moves in this position. White can also play g3, and this would be a transposition into what is known as Catalan, where white fianchettos the light squared bishop. But none of this was played in this game. Emanuel Lasker played the move e3, which helps him develop the light squared bishop faster, but at the same time, puts the dark squared bishop at a slight disadvantage. So now if Lasker wants to develop the dark squared bishop, it would have to be fianchettoing to b2. That's how the bishop usually gets developed in these types of variations. fortunately for Lasker, it didn't really come to that. Well, it kind of did, but it came to that, and he was a beneficiary of a slightly more efficient development, as you guys will see momentarily. So Wilhelm Steinitz castled, which is a more common thing to do in most openings. You just want to either castle your king as soon as possible, making it safe, or you want to castle the opposite direction, and in some rare cases you want to keep your king in the center because it's arguably going to be safer there. This is not one of such openings, so black goes ahead and castles. Lasker plays bishop to d3, which is the most standard place for the bishop to be. It's looking towards black's king side, eyeing the h7 pawn. It also helps white play e4, which is a breakthrough move in the center, something white would love to do as soon as possible. Once again, it doesn't really come to that, as Lasker's opponent goes ahead and plays c5, immediately trying to apply as much pressure against white's center as possible. Now, there's many different ways to trade in this case. White can trade on d5, and now if black takes back with an e-pawn, white has an ability to take on c5 yet again, giving black an isolated pawn on d5, which, if played incorrectly, is going to become a burden or a weakness at a later stage of the game. That's not what Lasker went for, however. He went ahead and took the pawn on c5, giving his opponent a chance to transpose into the endgame. So in Queen's Gambit Declined, there are a couple of really tricky lines that involve early queen exchanges. So this is one of those lines where his opponent immediately takes on c4, forcing white to take, and then queens get traded off. This may seem like it's just the position is just going to be equal, but that couldn't be farther away from the truth. Because right now, speaking of this position going into an endgame, kind of, this is still not an endgame, as there's still many pieces left on the board, but because the queens are gone, it actually makes a lot of sense for white to keep the king in the center, as it cannot be attacked as easily. So white already has an advantage where their king is going to be placed slightly better than black's, as it's closer to the center. As pieces will keep coming off the board, the king's duty is going to be trying and going into the center, helping the pieces out. So that's going to be in white's favor as the game goes on. Here Lasker figured that he can always play the move king e2 whenever he wants to, but he may not get another chance to perform the following plan. He went ahead and played the move a3. Now obviously if black does not recapture their pawn, it might be already too late, because white is preparing b4, which is going to help them hold the c5 pawn. So Steinitz took on c5, and now Lasker went ahead and played the move b4, which wins the tempo, right? The move b4 attacks the black's bishop, forcing it away, and now I find it a little bit strange that Lasker played king e2 here, because once again, I don't actually, now as I'm thinking about it a little bit more, I feel like it doesn't matter, but after having played b4, in my mind, it would have been more logical to play bishop b2 immediately, because that's part of the reason why we played b4 in the first place, freeing up the b2 square to get our bishop out there. Once again, it's a kind of move white can make any time, so I feel like between bishop b2 and king e2, there wouldn't be much of a difference, as one is going to definitely come after the other. So king e2 comes in, bishop d7. Once again, Lasker is delaying bishop b2, but you know, it's to no one's surprise that he will eventually get the bishop out there. So bishop b3 is a preventative move, right? Because Lasker may feel a little bit unsafe with the bishop being out on a c file right now. It is very important for us to think for our opponent, right? So whenever we see that our opponent is developing in a certain manner, we have to be ready, we have to be prepared for our opponent's pieces to start attacking us, right? So here there is two open files, the c file and the d file, and as we know the opening principles, the rooks are the pieces striving to be on open files, so it makes it very logical to expect both of black's rooks to go out there, and this is why Lasker plays the move bishop b3, removing the bishop from the potential danger. Rook a c8 does come through, and now bishop b2 In this case, Lasker might have a small advantage. It's not anything critical just yet, but the advantage lies in the fact that black actually has less space here. I feel like what Steinitz did with his next move was a little bit premature, because black's development is not complete yet. The rook on f8 is still not in, so I feel like the most logical move to make here would be, once again, rook f to d8. Having less space is not black's only issue. As you can see, the bishop on d7 is kind of on the way, but this is why, for when the bishop ends up this way, where it's on the rook's way, we usually pull it all the way back to e8. So for example, something like this might have happened. The bishop would end up hiding on e8. It's a piece that we would much rather not have, but it gets the job done. The bishop is now developed. It's not on anyone's way. Rooks are good. If white plays move rook to d1, black might get a chance to start trading. If black is trying to make a draw, trading pieces sometimes is definitely the way to go, and this might actually be a good time for that, because having less space to work with, I feel like black is the one benefiting from these trades, as white will not have as many pieces to annoy black. So going back and seeing that Steinitz played a5 here, which once again is an aggressive attempt to seize some space from his opponent. a5 forces white to make a decision. There's a couple of options. White can take on a5, which gives black an ability to begin advancing and attacking white's pieces immediately. So knight takes a5 comes in with a tempo, right? Whenever we play chess, it is ideal case scenario where we make a move and it accomplishes two or more things at the same time. So in this case, black recovers their missing pawn while simultaneously attacking white's bishop and also getting the knight ready to go to c4, which would be another attack, right? So in this case, black is beginning to win the tempo game, and that's something that white would most definitely want to avoid. Option number 2, which is arguably one of the worst ones, I don't really like it, is to defend the b4. I think this is the only way we can do it with knight to a2. Now our knight is severely misplaced. We do not want our knight to be doing a defender's job. Ideally speaking, we don't want any of our pieces to be defenders, because it halts our ability to, attack our opponent and potentially win the game. And option number 3, which is exactly what Lasker went for, is to just push the pawn up. This does give up some of the space. Specifically, the c5 square may now be used by some of black's pieces, the bishop or the rook. Knight retreats, and Lasker says, okay, I've had enough. It's time to attack. Goes ahead and plays knight e5. This is the point of the game where Steinitz was most definitely feeling uncomfortable, as his bishop is attacked. It may not be a good idea for black to give up a bishop pair advantage. Once again, I'm a big proponent of a bishop pair, but knight takes d7 is not the only threat that white is bearing here. Can somebody, whether online or the live audience, can somebody tell me what is the secondary and arguably a more dangerous idea of this move knight e5? Attacking bishop is one. What is the other threat? Knight c4. Bravo. Knight to c4. This threat is, once again, in these cases, I like making a dummy move to demonstrate what the move is actually threatening. So knight c4 would be just a singular attack against the bishop, but the bishop doesn't actually have a good place to go. It cannot end up on a7, as we would win the pawn on a5 in this case. It cannot really go to c7 either, because then we have b6, and we might still end up winning material. And ultimately, if the bishop ends up on d8, that's not a good place for the bishop, because that's where the black rook is supposed to end up. Yeah. So this is where Steinitz is starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed, because he's looking that what it looks to him is that his bishop is in trouble, but also there is knight c4. So now he has to choose what to do, whether he wants to lose the bishop, and if not, whether he's okay allowing knight c4 or not. Steinitz should have been okay losing the bishop pair. At this point, I feel like he should have just played the move bishop to c7, securing the development, right? Because it's so important to make sure all of your pieces are in the game. If some of your pieces are missing, you are at a huge disadvantage. So even though he is now slightly worse because white does have a bishop pair advantage, it's not critical. The advantage is not critical. Black can still survive. But his choice to save the bishop pair, plus this move, as you guys can tell, this move is severely misplacing the rook. Now the rook can never come out. White's rooks are pretty much always ready to jump into action. Black's rook is now stuck on f8 until the bishop leaves. And that's not going to happen for a while, as something is telling me. So actually, Lasker plays the move a4, which is interesting because I feel like he might have already played knight c4 and could have gotten a big advantage, but he plays it a little bit safe, on the safer side. I think knight c4, he might have calculated something along these lines, and maybe there's some trick with a4 somewhere here. So by playing a4, Lasker solidifies the pawn structure and specifically wants to keep the a5 pawn where it is so that it's easy to target later on. Bishop c4 comes through, and now he does go knight c4, threatening b6. I'm getting a question in the chat asking if rook takes knight c3 could have been played, which would qualify as a positional sacrifice. Black would sacrifice the exchange and then win the pawn. I'm pretty sure this was the idea, but instead of being passive, black is now on an attacking side. I'm not sure this would be enough because white has this move bishop to c4. As somebody who is down material, black wouldn't be happy about having to trade pieces. So if black wants to avoid trading, the bishop would have to end up somewhere on a4, let's say, and now white goes rook b1, hitting the bishop and skewering it because there's a pawn behind. I don't think this is enough. Black is still going to be on the defending side, and black is also down material, so it feels like it's not going to be enough to justify the sacrifice. So yeah, let's go back to the game. After a4, bishop c7, knight c4, bishop d7 was played by Steinitz, and b6 didn't come through. I'm beginning to wonder if there is something I am missing about b6, because to me it looks like white might just be winning some material. But you see, Lasker was just way too procedural about it. He probably realized that he had b6 and he could go for extra material immediately. But he's also not forgetting the fact that some of his pieces are still not in the game, right? So he is not in a hurry to play b6. He goes ahead and goes rook ac1. Once again, I feel like I would have played b6, trying to seize the opportunity to win material. But this is going to be a difference between piece activity. I think Lasker is looking to win the game not by taking some free stuff from his opponent, but by underlining the difference between the pieces, between how good his pieces are versus how bad his opponent's pieces are going to be. Keeping b6 as a trump card, yeah, it's a good point. Sometimes the threat is stronger than its execution, right? It's a known fact. So leaving b6 hovering in the air may actually improve its strengths along the way. Well, Steinitz has to do something about it. Either Steinitz plays b6, which actually makes it so that the b6 pawn is now a burden to black's pieces. And if we look at how black will be potentially finishing the development, we can now see that the bishop is stuck having to defend the b6. That's no bueno. So Steinitz instead plays the move knight d5, which serves as a slight relief, right? Because it offers an even trade. It takes care of the b6 idea for the time being. And after knights do get off the board, Lasker goes ahead and plays knight e5. This move is essentially forcing black to trade one of their bishop pairs, because if Steinitz would have tried to save the bishop pair, I'm sure there is some tactic. Oh, well, first of all, there's a very simple way to win material. Can somebody tell me how would white win material by force in this position? Bishop a3, yes, is one of the ways. I would throw in bishop takes d5 first, and then would go bishop a3 so that there is no knight b4. It might still have worked. Aha, no, wait. I feel like we're missing a tactic. I think both me and the public are missing a tactic, and maybe, just maybe, this doesn't work anymore. So what I'm seeing now is that after bishop a3, bishop takes e5. Now rook takes c8 runs into bishop b5, which is a check, and we're also going to be losing the rook on c8. Here we're actually down a pawn, so this is not working out. And this same idea is present if we begin by taking on d5. It's the same thing where black can take on e5. If we follow the other suggestion from the chat, bishop takes d5, pawn takes d5, and b6, I think black can just take on e5. Because now if we take on c8, we're going to end up losing both of our bishops, and that's actually not even a good trade for us. Yeah, we're winning a rook for 2 white pieces. That's not good enough. And if we take here, we are losing the a4. So I feel like maybe bishop e8 would have been a chance for black to hold their position together, utilizing the tactical motives. Yeah, but all in all, we can argue that Lasker doesn't even have to invest himself into this plan, right? What Lasker might have ended up doing is something like this, where he's just slowly going to keep improving his pieces the way he's been doing it the whole time. Yeah, and once again, if you look at black's side of things, we can see that it's just not working out for black. Yeah, the pieces are in complete disarray. Yes, they're kind of working together to make some tactics possible, but if not for tactics, there's nothing good about black's position here. So Steinitz didn't want to deal with that. He goes ahead and trades his dark squared bishop for white's knight on e5. The trade does go through, and here Steinitz plays f6. This is another cool point of the game, which is why I chose it, and that is the Lasker's ability to transform the advantage properly. So here, Lasker could have for sure have kept his bishop pair by playing something like bishop d6, and then the game would have gone on. But instead of doing this, he immediately seizes this opportunity that he has only at this specific moment. He plays this move e4. This may seem like a bad idea because, well, he is trading his strong bishop on e5 away. Yeah, that just doesn't add up. But reality is such that black does not have a choice. Black has to take on e5, because if black doesn't, there's going to be material losses. So if knight moves anywhere, bishop c7 comes in, and I'm afraid black is going to be losing the game very, very soon. If a5 follows, this knight is going to be next, and it's just a snowball effect, or a domino effect, whichever one you like the most. So black has to take on e5. White takes. They're missing piece back, and obviously part of this advantage transformation technique revolves around tactical vision, right? So Lasker notices that this is not an even trade. Not only is this forcing the black king into the corner, and the king obviously wants to end up somewhere in the center at this point, but also white ends up winning the pawn on b7. With the pawn as strong as the b5, that b5 has now become a pass pawn, and with black's king being as far away from the queen side as it is, I feel there's going to be close to zero trouble for white to promote this guy. So black can pretty much never capture on d5. Logically, if black can never capture on d5, e6 needs protection. So there's no better piece to use for this purpose other than king. This move helps black defend the e6, helps black bring the king closer towards the center. All in all, a very nice multi-purpose move. But now there's going to be a different problem. Finally, the last rook is coming in. Rook h to d1. Steinitz plays king e7, and now d6 check. It is very, very important to play d6 here, because if white doesn't, if white chooses to take on e6 for whatever reason, after bishop takes e6, a lot of pieces are going to end up traded. We can keep arguing that white's position will always be better. Can somebody tell me why, even if white decides to trade most of the pieces in this position, why would I believe white's position would still be better than black's? There's one simple logical reason why. So the pawn structure, why is pawn structure, why does it matter so much? Well, because white has 2 pawn islands, right, and black has 3 pawn islands, right? Their e5 pawn is disconnected, meaning that most endgames are going to be in white's favor. The e5 pawn is going to be a burden, it's going to be weakness, it's going to be for white to decide the e5 pawn's fate. Yes. But once again, there's no need for this, because white has a much, much better option, which is to play d6. Playing d6 not only provides white with a pass pawn, but it also paralyzes most of black's pieces. Now the bishop cannot leave the d7 ever. Otherwise, our pawn is going to keep marching. So d6 comes in, king f6. This position is completely winning. And now, whenever you are in a position where your opponent's pieces are in a bind, as bad as this, the key is to make sure you improve every single piece in your possession as much as possible. So while it may feel very tempting to go in and try to just end the game here and now, there's nothing your opponent can do, right? Your opponent just sits there and waits for you to finish the game. If you make any forced attempts to win and you are wrong because some of your pieces are not where they need to be, you're not going to win the game. So for example, here after this rook trade, our pawn ends up on c7, which is arguably good news, but what's next? Now as it's on c7, it is close to impossible for it to promote, as black has a lock on the c8 square. So while this might still be winning for white, because we can argue that, oh, we're going to go b6, now we will never lose our pass pawn, and then now we can maybe focus our attempts on the other side of the board because we will not promote, but the pass pawn will always be there. So while this might still be winning, there's no need for this because not all of our pieces are fully improved at this moment. So this is what Lasker does. He plays the move king e3. Remember, guys, what I said about king needing to be in the center. The king is yearning for the e4 square. As any defender would, Steinitz goes ahead and tries to trade as much as possible, not realizing that trading actually doesn't save him in this case. He trades both rooks, and Lasker has nothing against it. But because of how bad the black's pawn structure is and how strong the pawn on d6 is, the game just ends. Lasker plays bishop c2, asking the h7 pawn a question of where it wants to be. Cheap trick comes out with king f7, oh no, my pawn, but then oh no, your bishop, right? The bishop is now trapped. A very, very cheap trick, which actually doesn't work. And this is something that was pointed out by Mikhail Tal. I think Mikhail Tal was the one who said that whenever calculating tactics, always always double. How did he say that? Basically, Tal urged players to always double check your opponent's tactical attempt, because many people feel like they've got the tactical attempt correctly while it's not really working the way they think it does. So in this case, white can indeed take on h7, and after g6, king e4, black actually does not have time to go and capture the bishop, because if they do, guess who's going to decide the game? The pawn on d6 and the king coming through e7 is just going to end it all. We can't really promote the pawn per se, but what we can do is we can win our missing piece back, and our king is just going on a rampage, sweeping everything in its path. So the game ended fairly quickly. Now Lasker is also up a pawn, alongside with having a absolutely monstrous pass pawn on d6. Oops, my apologies, I misclicked. I'm just going to show you guys how the game ended. g4. I don't really like g4 because it allows black to to create a bind on dark squares. I would have started with h4, so I feel like this was a little bit of an oversight on Lasker's end. H4 would guarantee that anytime black tries for g5, we have h5, and now we have two passed pawns. This is just game over immediately. But he allows it. Once again, does not really matter. Brings the bishop back. Black is trying desperately to get rid of the pawn on d6, but falls a little bit too short. Now Lasker goes ahead and plays h4, h5, and black is just one tempo too short, trying to stop the h-pawn this time. So after king e8, king e3, Steinitz just resigned because he is out of moves. He can wander with his king back and forth, but eventually, there's going to be, the game is going to be over at some point. It's just Lasker is the one deciding when that moment is going to be. So I feel like this is an excellent game, excellent demonstration of Lasker's skill, his understanding of Queen's Gambit declined positions, his understanding of pressure, right? Lasker wasn't in a hurry to seize his intangible advantage, right? He had an intangible advantage. He had more space. He had better development. He had an ability to transform his intangible advantage into tangible advantage by winning material, but he was never in a hurry. He was never tempted by a single point of material, right? He was pushing out for more. He was greedy. And sometimes, arguably most of the time, if we believe that we can get a lot more than just a pawn, we should try for it. So this is one of my favorite games of Emanuel Lasker. And if you don't have any questions in the chat or in the auditorium, I'll move to the next game because, as always, I'm taking forever to show a single game. The old Ilya is back, the one that takes forever to show a quick game. I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to move on. This one comes from a position, and I believe that Lasker was playing with black pieces in this game. It's his game, one of his World Championship match games against Frank James Marshall, who has an opening line named after him. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The opening line in Ruy Lopez? Yeah, the one where you sacrifice pawns and rush your opponent's king as black. Yep. So this is Lasker's game against Marshall, and this was won in another spectacular endgame manner. Marshall Gambit. Yes, exactly, Soren. So I checked this game with an engine. I made a mistake. I made a mistake of checking this game with an engine, and the engine was not incredibly impressed by either of the sides, but wasn't incredibly displeased by the play either. So in this position, Lasker made a decision to play f6, which is a decent, reasonable move. The move f6 is undermining White's central pawn, getting ready to open up the f file. And over here, the engine says that, oh, maybe White should just take and then finish developing. But Marshall goes ahead and plays the move f3, essentially asking Black Knight the question, okay, where are you going to go? Because it doesn't seem like there's a good place for the knight. g5 feels awkward. It feels like the knight is going to suffocate on g5. It can only go back to e6 unless Black is trying to sacrifice something, which is very unlikely to work out. But sometimes, even if your piece is under attack, maybe you don't necessarily have to do much about it. Black went ahead and took on e5, performing what is known as a positional sacrifice. I could argue that this is not exactly a positional sacrifice because there is a tactical reasoning behind it. White has no choice. White has just lost the pawn, so they have no choice but to go along with Black's play by taking the knight. And now d4 comes through. So the positional sacrifice case might have been achieved had White played something along the lines of bishop c1, because if you think about it, there's only two squares where the bishop can hide right now. It's either d2 or c1, and both are actually not good for White. If the bishop hides on c1, then this game is going to end instantly, because after queen f2, king h1, can somebody help me find the finisher? Black to play and win. Okay, Saren got it. People online are sharp. What about you guys in the auditorium? Black to play and win. Very simple. We have to keep hitting white. If you're down a piece, every move has to be an attack. And it just so happens to be very effective now. Oh, there you go. Yeah, bishop to g4, correct. So this move wins the game on the spot because now white has to do something about this threat. Losing the queen is no bueno. Taking on g4 is over instantly, right? Queen takes e1, checkmate on the first rank. The queen actually cannot run. Wherever the queen goes, we always have a back rank checkmate. If it goes to d2, we have queen f1, sacrificing the queen and checkmating on the back rank. If it goes to d3, we can once again take the rook with a back rank checkmate. Well, after white gives up the queen. So this move wins instantaneously. And so if the bishop ends up on d2 instead, now I think it's very, very important to understand something about the move order. Actually, no, in this case it doesn't. It doesn't matter. I take it back. Either bishop g4 or queen f2 would both work and end up in the same position. So let's see, queen f2 check, king h1, now bishop g4 once again, using the fact that white can never take the bishop. Taking would mean death. What kind? Instant. So queen c1 is the only option, and this is the point where white is up material, but there's something seriously wrong about white's position. That is, the pieces are all on the first rank, yeah? So black can just slowly pull over some more attackers, and white will most definitely die eventually, yeah? Because the pieces are all not in. So Marshall makes a correct choice, I believe. He just says that, you know what, I'm going to play g3, hitting your queen, and then I'm just going to give you your missing piece back, but in return, I am going to offer a bunch of trades and potentially get my pieces out just on time to be okay. That's what Marshall believed. Cold shower came in. The endgame, right? The endgame came in, and it might have seemed that, oh well, you know, what's possible? What can possibly go wrong? It's an endgame. Nobody is up or down anything. Oh, well, black has doubled pawns. It must be really good news for white. Yeah, but okay. Going back to my multiple previous discussions about the piece synergy, I want to point out that black has a rook and a bishop working together. The position is open. White has an isolated pawn on e4, which is an easy target for black pieces. Yes, black does have a problem, which is double pawns on a c-file, but I'm going to demonstrate to you guys how easy Lasker made it look, because the win felt completely, you know, it was like the simplest thing in the world. After rook b5, Marshall goes c4, trying to cement the position, understandably so. Now he has a nice looking pawn chain here. I feel like Marshall should have been focused more on getting the pieces out, because after rook h5, now white has to spend another tempo going back to g1. That's somewhere where the king doesn't really want to be, because the king wants to be here somewhere. Playing h4 would run into g5. Now it's getting closer to white immediately losing the game, because if white takes after rook h1, the first rank is entirely paralyzed. So now, even though white is up a pawn, they're playing down two pieces, so the game is just going to end. So king g1 was a must. Lasker played c5. Finally, knight d2 came in. King f7. Yes, so Lasker is doing a great job moving the king towards the center, somewhere towards e5 possibly. Rook f1, king e7, and now a3. So a3 may seem like a normal looking move, like what, nothing to see here, maybe preparing some b4 to open up the a file, but a3 now becomes a very annoying hook, and Lasker immediately takes advantage of it. Goes rook h6, getting ready to transfer the rook over to a6. Once again, none of these moves are anything special. Lasker just identifies the target and pursues it. Yeah, nothing too complicated. h4. I guess it is Marshall's attempt to free up the king from having to defend the h2. Rook a6 comes in, and now rook a1. The alternatives are not so much better. If white ends up playing a4, now there is... we can't forget about playing b4 as white, yeah, because playing b4 is now probably impossible. If black ever feels threatened by b4, they'll play a5, and it's just completely impossible to play b4 anymore. Playing knight b1 would severely misplace the knight on b1. Right now, potentially Lasker could be focused on attacking the e4, and guess what? I feel like it's going to be very, very successful, as our king is already there. Right? The e4 is in grave danger. Or option number 3, which is misplacing the rook. So I guess Marshall thought to himself, well, if Lasker misplaced his rook on a6, I'm going to be misplacing my rook on a1, and it's just going to be like canceling each other. You know, Lasker has a veered rook on a6, I have a veered rook on a1. Nothing is going to happen, but that is not true, because now Lasker is able to shift the focus onto his main strengths in this position, which is the connected passed pawn on d4. This rook has to be somewhere close in the center to deter the pawn from pushing. Not going to happen. King f2, king e6. Finally, Marshall realizes that, oh wait, I actually need the rook to be somewhere here, because otherwise this pawn is just going to go. So he goes a4, but it's too late now. This position is now lost for white. White has made seemingly normal moves, and by the way, the position was roughly equal, with black having a slight edge according to the engine, but with a couple of moves where white has lost time. White has lost valuable time not placing pieces where they need to be. In endgames, that kind of stuff, punishable by death or punishable by loss. Okay, nobody. This is not a battle royale game, right? But you guys know what I mean. So king g2, rook f6, now cutting the king on the f file, rook e1, and finally d3. This is very, very effective. Our king is squeezing itself into the white side, and the game just ends immediately. So rook f1, why trade rooks? Why not? We don't even care. Our king is going to do all the job. Takes, king f2, and oh wait, maybe, just maybe, the king is going to catch up with black's king. Is all going to be okay. Now the good friend, aka Zugzwang, is coming into play. So black just waits, because white doesn't have a good move. As soon as white runs out of pawn moves, the king does not want to leave, right? Because if the king leaves, the black king breaches through. No more pawn moves, knight has to move. Black captures the pawn for free, king moves. Black king keeps the advance. Now, once again, white is completely paralyzed, so knight moves back and forth until, once again, at this point, Lasker could have already gone left and picked up all the pawns, but he improves his position as much as possible. He pulls all of his pawns up as much as possible so that they are closer to being promoted. So he goes king f3, takes on g3, begins running this pawn down, puts the knight on d6 in a bind by playing c5, takes pawn number 3, and take a look at these monsters. There is no stopping the pawns, and the game ended here. Once again, wonderful demonstration of Lasker's endgame knowledge and endgame technique. Arguably one of his best games ever played. Frank Marshall was a really strong attacking player. It's a shame how he couldn't become a world champion, to be honest. Well, in life you need a little bit of luck, right, to win the right games. Unfortunately, Marshall didn't have that little bit of luck where he needed it to be present, and I agree. I think he probably was deserving of the title, but it didn't work out for him. They should have played it out, and white should have tried for stalemate. Okay, on that level, that's not going to happen. Plus, we are talking about the game that was being adjourned after move 40, right? So in this case, they've gotten a bunch of extra time after 40 moves. The position was already lost, as it were. So Marshall trying for an extra 10 moves, he really didn't want to lose, okay? Because, you know, when the game is adjourned on move 40, over here, when you cannot even move, you only have one legal move to keep yourself alive, you might as well resign. But Marshall was really hoping for a miracle, which did not happen. He got a club named for him, though. Yeah, the Marshall Chess Club of New York City. That is indeed the club named after him, and it is a pretty cool club to that. Hopefully most of you guys have had a chance to visit Marshall Chess Club. I definitely have. I've been there. Actually, I visited the club about 5 times, I think, over the past 10 years. So it's definitely a place with the extensive history built into it. Okay, I feel like I don't have enough time to show all 4 of the games, so I will show the game where Lasker was given a chance to attack, and he did not miss it. Okay, so in this position came from one of the closed Ruy Lopez lines, where White eventually played the move d4, breaking Black's center. Black took on d4 twice, as they had pawns on both sides, and now White has a dilemma. Lasker was probably thinking to himself, do I really need to win this d4 pawn back? Because all in all, this pawn doesn't really do much for Black. It's not really threatening any advance or promotion or whatnot. It does take away some squares from White's pieces, such as e3, but all in all, the pawn in itself isn't really being very dangerous and obnoxious. So Lasker just goes ahead and ignores it, starting to point his pieces towards the Black's king side. Goes ahead and plays bishop g5, pitting the knight. The bishop on g5 is pretty annoying, so I don't blame. This is Lasker's game against Siegbert Tarrasch, by the way. My apologies for not mentioning this. Once again, one of their World Championship match games, where Tarrasch played the move h6. By the way, about this match, I think Lasker won this match with an overwhelming score. Or was it? No. I think it was not against Tarrasch. My apologies. It was against Marshall that Lasker won with an overwhelming score. Haven't even lost a singular game. In this match, he has lost some games, but still came out on top. So h6 came in. Bishop h4. Obviously, we do not take. Bishop pair is life. Right, we do not trade our bishop pair away in an open position unless we can back it up with some immediate material gain. Right, so we play bishop h4. Queen b6. Looks like Tarrasch has gotten a wrong idea. He is really focused on trying to keep the pawn on d4 alive. The pawn does not matter. What Tarrasch should have done instead is Tarrasch should have focused on developing. So moves like bishop e6, bishop b7, you name it, would have been a better option than trying to keep the inconsequential pawn alive. So goes queen b6, and this is where Lasker is on the hunt. He is on the hunt to punish the improper development. Goes queen d3. Now, what's the idea of this move? Can somebody tell me? What is the idea of queen d3? I mean, even if you're not a chess specialist, you might probably notice what this is doing. Yeah, building a battery. And now, arguably, we can afford ourselves the luxury. Why am I showing you guys? I haven't heard the answer yet. I'm sorry. Okay, let's say this was a rhetorical question. Yeah, let's just say everybody saw this. Yeah, everybody in chat saw this. You know, yeah, building the battery. Now we can afford to trade our bishop away because it ends with us winning material, specifically a bishop, or even checkmating if you're lucky. Yeah. So obviously that cannot be allowed. So Tarrasch plays the move to this is the kind of move that if you have to make this kind of move in the middle game, you know that you've screwed up somewhere. Yeah, you're playing g5, you're exposing your king side. Bishop g3. Yes, Black has a little tiny room for a break at this very moment only. Right, bishop e6, trying to finish developing. Tarrasch does the same. Goes rook d1. Essentially saying that he's not really afraid of anything. Bishop a2 is a severe misplacement of the bishop. Also is going to run into b3, right? So the bishop is going to be trapped. Rook fc8. Rook f8 is another misconception, right? Rook fc8 is the move that shows Tarrasch's complete disregard to his king's safety. If he was even slightly concerned about his king potentially getting mated, he would have kept the rook here, right? Because however unlikely the rook might be in helping protect your king, it's still there. It may come in handy along the way, but making this move essentially shows that Tarrasch does not believe he can be hurt on the king side. The game ended within the next 10 moves, or maybe like 12 to 13 moves, so he definitely could. He just didn't realize it. So here he goes knight d7 and runs into e5. Just head on e5. There's nothing good about opening up this diagonal for Black. if queen ever reaches h7, it's just immediate game over, right? So knight f8 is essentially forced, trying to hold the king side together. Now queen f3, the queen is getting repositioned towards h5, where it's going to be annoying the h6 pawn. With the queen on h5, we can then look for some breakthroughs, right? We still need to expose black's king side as much as possible. So d5 comes in. Once again, d5 is the kind of move that shows disregard to what is going on. If Tarrasch felt danger, he would have probably even tried taking on e5, because that means the queen can potentially join in defending the h6 pawn. But he just, sometimes people just are oblivious. You know, in chess games, people are oblivious. That they just think that nothing is going to happen. And, you know, whenever you play somebody strong like Lasker, you're going to be quickly put down. Okay, so queen h5 comes in, king g7, f4. There is no ignoring this, right? f4 cannot be ignored because f5 is coming in. If f5 comes in, all hell is going to break loose. Black is going to lose half of their set after this. So that's why Tarrasch goes ahead and plays f5 himself, allowing the en passant. Maybe he forgot about en passant. Maybe he saw all this and he's like, oh, I'm going to play f5 and I'm safe. Yeah. Oh no, there's en passant here. You know, this is maybe this was still a novel. No, it's not a novel rule for these guys. No. It's like a couple of 100 years ago this was introduced, so no way. Bishop takes f6, f takes g5. You guys can already see where this is going. All the pawns are getting removed. H takes g5, bishop e5. I feel like it may give off a wrong vibe, because oh wait, well, white is offering an even trade. But yeah, there's this very specific idea behind this trade, right? We're trying to remove as many defenders from black's king's side as possible. Bishop on f6 qualifies as a main defender, not only because he's holding the g5 pawn, but also because he's holding the sides where we would most definitely like to approach the king from. So bishop e5, d3, cheap trick. Nobody's forgetting about the checks, you know. It's a classical game after all. King h1, knight g6, and here we have a tactic, a very simple tactic to just pick up material without really investing anything into it. Queen g5 with all of the pins, all of the skewers going on. Black's bishop is in a grave danger. So bishop f7. Finally, the black queen is used as a defender. It should have been used as a defender 10 moves ago, arguably, but maybe better late than never. Well, sometimes it is indeed too late, because knight g3 comes in, knight jumps in right into I want to say pits of hell, but there's no hell for white, there's hell for black. So knight is there to deliver the ultimate punishment. Bishop trade goes through, rook h8, trying, hoping that maybe by holding the h5 square, maybe Lasker will forget that this is leading into a massive even trade of pieces, and maybe somehow, some way, black is going to survive this, even though I believe that the endgame is still completely lost for black, because these two guys are connected. I think the endgame should be lost also. But why? Why allow the endgame to happen if you can just keep the pieces on the board? Once again, incredible patience shown by Lasker, as he is not in a hurry to go ahead and try to kill black. He's gradually pulling in more attackers, because he can. There's no time limit on how much he should be improving his position for. So he goes rook de1, doubling the rooks, king f8, and this is where he finally decides that, okay, it's enough. I'm going to go ahead and win the game right now. Goes ahead, takes on g6, removing the knight. Goes queen e3, tripling down on the e file, also threatening. Bunch of checks from the left side. Rook c7 comes in, and now knight f5, which leaves black completely hopeless to a simple but a very effective threat of queen a3, as the knight is going to be jumping in and finishing the game for white. So black played queen c6, I guess, trying for some queen c5 defense, but now it is the right side, aka the king side, is going to be suffering the most, as queen g5 threatens queen g7 and queen d8, both of which are pretty much checkmates. So queen g7 is, but queen d8 a would-be checkmate threat. So that is Lasker in his attacking style, which I believe is also pretty cool because he's very gradual with it. He's not like many other people of the past that just throw the pieces and hope for the best. Tao was arguably one such guy where he would just go for questionable attacking patterns that would work out because people were afraid of him. Yeah, Lasker is nothing like that. He's very gradual, very patient, even in his attacking style. So that is going to be my last example for today. I am a little bit early, go figure. I don't know, maybe I did have time, probably not, but this is my take on Emanuel Lasker and his reign for 27 years. He was a world champion, the longest that anybody was a world champion for. Thank you for joining me for this lecture. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care.
Elite Chess is back and better than ever at the 2026 American Cup in St. Louis. 2 sections of the country's top players will battle in a double elimination knockout for incredible cash prizes and ultimate bragging rights. Can returning favorites dominate, or will new royalty be crowned? Follow the action online or in person at the beautifully renovated St. Louis Chess Club. Don't miss the 2026 American Cup March 3rd through the 12th in St. Louis, the chess capital of America. Visit stlouischessclub.org to learn more and purchase your spectator ticket today.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Breaking Moves. It was just a wake-up call for anyone in the audience. I'm here, and we're back with some more Human Grandmaster Judit Polgar stuff. Now, we discussed Judit last time, and just a disclaimer, if you don't remember, just a reminder that there is a documentary on Netflix, Queen of Chess. Raise of hands, you watched it, considered it? All right, we've got a lot of, Queen of Chess is the name of the documentary. It's about Judit Polgar. We discussed a couple of her games, and games that you cannot find in that documentary. But we're going to actually kind of delve deeper in this topic, but from a different lens. So Judit obviously was a child prodigy. She actually broke the record of Fischer, which is she's most famous of, until obviously she became top 10 in the world combined. So we are going to look at one of her games against a world champion, namely Vasilin Topalov. But then we're going to compare with a girl who's an up-and-coming prodigy. She is representing England. Her name is Bodhana Sivanandan. Any of you heard of her? So she is very young. She's literally 10 years old. Her rating is inching and high 2200s, so it's getting closer to 2300. And we're going to see how she plays right now and kind of see the differences. Now, obviously, there's a lot of time differential. Judit was already in this game a super grandmaster, and Bodhana is a prodigy, literally just starting her career, so to say. So Judit obviously plays in her traditional aggressive style, but she's facing a world champion. Now, what do you expect from Judit? What would you do in her place if you would be facing world champion Vasilin Topalov from Bulgaria? What would be your choice? Would you go at it, attack the world champion immediately, or take it slower? Attack? All right. Yeah, that is definitely her style. So let's see what she did. So let's flippity flip this. So e4, and I think that's like the right choice. You should do what you are familiar with. One of the mistakes people do is that they think, oh, I'm going to make the biggest surprise and the biggest Hail Mary I could do, and then I'm just going to miraculously win the game. That's still a big of a stretch when you're really the underdog or considered an underdog. Now, this is not technically, like this time, she was already established in the top ranks. So she's not really technically an underdog, but Topalov is the world champion. And asking that and wondering about that, do you think Topalov is going to play exactly as he used to? Would he change strategies or would he mix it up to throw off Judit? I'm asking you too, chat. You guys been slowing down, I can see. Yeah, they are going to mix it up. That's very much correct because Judit is already established as a very aggressive player, so they don't want to get attacked. So Topalov, surprisingly, because Topalov is also very similar in style of Judit. Both are very aggressive chess players. Topalov usually played the Najdorf. And that's not necessarily a good choice against Judit because she can definitely choose her traditional aggressive English attack. Instead, Topalov goes for the French, and the French is somewhat of a crooked opening, a Korchnoi favorite, who obviously played a lot of matches against Karpov. And the thing with that is that your bishop is always going to be miserable. And Judit is trying to take full advantage of it. And I think she's choosing the right opening here. Now, first guess. Which move would pinpoint that, okay, buddy, your bishop is horrendous? E5. E5. And indeed, that's what she plays. Now, if we're looking from a computer standpoint, knight c3 is definitely high up, and it's something that Judit mostly did throughout her career, keeping the position open while the bishop is still locked in. But it's sort of a mixed bag because black can also try to blow it open or close it down depending on their style. Like knight f6, bishop b4 are typical ideas, or even d takes e4. This was played by Ponomaryov against Kasparov. Kasparov was playing white. One of the ideas is that this bishop eventually will find its way out of that maze, and it's not going to be locked in. But e5 also is somewhat less popular at that moment. It's sort of gaining momentum right now. It's also topical again. But it has one little bit of a drawback, that the d4 pawn is going to be attacked a lot of the times. So c5, c3, knight c6, knight f3. So that's kind of the strategical dilemma. I have the d4 pawn that I have to nurture. And as long as I don't lose the center, white is doing great. But you will have to defend a bit. Bishop d7, very natural. It's kind of preparing that rook to join the fray. Bishop e2, f6. That f6 move, the beauty of this move is that in every other opening, most every other opening. This is the worst move you could play. Almost doesn't matter where you do it, it's just not good. But here in the French, it's actually great. Why? Because your bishop is mostly terrible because it's blocked in by the pawn on e5. Once there's a trade here, you're just one more trade away to activate the bishop and have an open position. Castles. Now, the issue here, though, for black is that the king is still stuck in the middle, right? So if you start trading, your king is still very much in danger. And even though it's a close position, I can still kind of probe your king. And you should. Whenever you are ahead in development, you want to actually open up, crack that knot really quickly before black gets to get their pieces out. For that reason, Topalov chooses queen b6. And I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty sure at this moment, Judit, and I would even guess Topalov, is more likely out of book. So every Grandmaster has preparation, but you can't actually prepare for everything, and eventually you'll have to play the game of chess. Now that's a warning for you, people watching. That's how chess is played. Eventually, you'll have to make your own decisions. And I have to ask then, what should we do now? Now, the point of queen b6 is twofold. One of them is that they pressure the b2 pawn, and they, of course, pressure the d4 pawn. e5 is sort of in a balance, because I've got two defending and you've got two attacking. So no one's really winning that battle. Now, oftentimes you would love to have like this supporting move of bishop f4, but that's a no-go because you drop the pawn on b2. Right? Illia is saying a3 could be an interesting idea here. The idea of b4. Very good. And that's actually very typical. You're trying to push your opponent to make a decision. And also, once this pawn, so let's say a3, I'm going to make a couple of moves for black, b4. Now, not only am I asking you the question of what are you going to do, you're also going to get your bishop to move around freely, that you couldn't do without losing the pawn. Now, you can sacrifice the pawn, but it costs a pawn. It's a lot in chess. So, a3 is one idea. But I'm more curious what the in-person audience thinks of the position. Because a3, of course, is an option, but there's definitely multiple ways of treating this. There are situations, the question is, how would you do it? Now, also, don't forget, this is a completely different case. So, in some situations, you can sacrifice it, but this is different from what it usually is. We're out of theory, therefore, it may or may not work. But, all that said, if you want to give up that pawn so badly, the center pawn over here, you can, if you want to.
I don't want to. Here I play knight a3.
Knight a3, very good. Now, knight a3 is a typical idea. But I do want to ask you first, before I talk, what is your plan with knight a3? Where is your knight headed?
c2.
Mm-hmm.
c2, and I don't have any more problems.
Okay. Does anyone have different plans with the knight?
I feel like you're kind of alluding to c4.
Let's see if you mean the pawn break. You could do the pawn break, although if you do the pawn break, usually your knight wants to be on c3 instead.
No, I see what you're saying. You're going to b5.
Yeah, so this one, it's something that you threaten. You don't always actually execute it because it also entails a pawn sacrifice. Let's say you do this, here, here, knight d6. This pawn often falls. So white actually need to produce something quickly before you lose that pawn, otherwise you'll just be down a pawn for nothing. But your idea, knight a3, knight c2, is very, very well said. That's plan number 2 in this typical position. So something that they do most of the cases. Knight a3 is somewhat risky because black may choose to trade and try to double the pawns. But I would even go as far as this is double-edged. It's neither good or bad. Why? Because this bishop was kind of stuck, and that's black's major issue, that you're stuck in a French position. But white gets the pair of bishops. So it's not like white can't claim something for the damages on the a file. Rook b1, not quite yet, but you will prepare it and then show up, right? Yes. I would honestly feel that white might be just a little bit more comfortable. Why? I'd say that white has easier play. It's just more straightforward. And sometimes that's one thing that grandmasters often mention. It's easier for you to find the moves than your opponent. Maybe objectively you're not winning or anything, but you just enjoy playing the position. Okay, so queen b6, a3 is, as I already said, maybe plan number 1. But she does, she does to Veselin's queen b6, number 3, the third option, which actually goes counter to almost everything we did. Because when we did knight a3, knight c2, you overprotect the d pawn. A3 and b4, again, is trying to release the tension from the d pawn. In some sense, you guys all alluded to this concept, but this one is not actually as risky. It's not a sacrifice. It's more of a decision that just feels wrong at first blink. So I kind of gave the spiel, the whole idea that, hey, I've got the center, and Topalov is going to attack me. Now Judit actually just flips the script, because she doesn't want to defend. Queen b3 is okay, but it's a bit more, again, on the side of trying to cover the d pawn.
Can you take on f6 here?
If you take on f6, you do get my knight. It's not bad. It's a trade. But your main point of concern is the d pawn. Yeah, go ahead. D takes c5. And indeed was played by Judit. And she's doing this because she says, okay, I'm giving up this, I'm trading off this pawn, but I will get this square in the future. You capture here, but capturing on c5 does not come free, because you can chase it around. So even though you gave up a center pawn, you're getting time, and black is losing time because the bishop that got developed has to move back. Bishop e7. Okay. So far, so good. And please keep track of what I've been feeding y'all, because the next move will not shock you if you've been paying attention. If we go rook e1, I might just eat the pawn on e5. So because you did the trade on c5, well, every decision you make has a consequence. The consequence is that your e-pawn is undefended. And this is sort of like these complicated moments where you want to sort of decide, what kind of compromises do I want to make? What would favor us? Do we want to trade really? No, not really. We don't want to trade it. So which move would be a move that's like, nah, I don't really want you to trade on f6. How can we avoid that? Bishop f4, yeah. Bishop f4, and exactly as I mentioned earlier, with this b4 idea of chasing it away, no longer is there any ideas for Topalov to take on b2, and Judit gets the momentum of over-defending the e5 pawn. And this is actually typical Judit play. She's incredibly creative when it comes to natural aggressive moves. She's creative in the openings, but if you're thinking about, is this theory, is this in the books? Yes, it's in the books after this game, but not before. So Topalov obliges. He needs to trade because otherwise this knight will not get out. Takes, knight f6. So black is practically a single move away from castling. How could we try to take advantage of that fact? A4, and what's your idea with pushing the pawn?
Basically, like eventually play a5 and just make the queen like go around.
Yeah, it's just chasing the queen, and you're also kind of encroaching into your opponent's position, which is very pleasant. In fact, she does so. Now, some of you may wonder, well, why don't we chase it with the bishop, right? Why don't we just go put the bishop here? Now, first of all, the queen is not actually too happy on b6 anymore. It had a function when there was a pawn that he was attacking, but there's no more pawn there. So if I'm chasing you by in itself, you are going to drop to a better square where they're actually controlling a square that will be more important. So a4 is kind of like keeping your bishop on a better square and also not giving black the option to move closer. a5, obviously Topalov is a fighter. He's not trying to give it an inch. Bishop h5 is an interesting idea, and I wouldn't be too dismissive of it, but probably she just didn't fancy giving up the pawn for that check. She does something similar, but instead just takes and tries to get development going. Castles, and now actually things are getting complicated, because Topalov's bishop is not bad at all anymore, right? It has a target. It actually defends black's only weakness on e6. So technically, black is not much worse, if worse at all. And it's also kind of getting annoying because eventually Topalov, well, may not do the Illia Nyzhnyk that we all love. The queen should be further back for the Illia Nyzhnyk, but it's still very annoying because they can try to press on this pawn, and in the long run, when you have a pawn that doesn't have a pawn to guard it, it's going to be a target. So the question is, how can we safeguard this fellow and sort of push it closer to our guys? The secret is trading pieces. You just have to do it cleverly. How can we set up a trade while also defending the pawn? Now, this plan that Judit actually executes is actually going to use something that's much lower value than the rook. So it's kind of like improving her pieces while doing so. So she starts off with rook b1, somewhat surprising at first view, because you are moving away from defending your pawn. But she's got an idea. Queen a7, and here's the idea. Bishop b5. And remember this. This is probably one of the most important conceptions. I call these charger pawns because they're kind of charging the bishop. But these bishops usually glue all these broken pawns that really doesn't have any support. And it's fantastic because oftentimes it's impossible to capture this pawn without casualties. The only way then they can do something about this if they take here, which is obviously just a trade, and then of course we're going to capture with the pawn, and voila, your pawn is not actually isolated from the group. So try this at home. You don't necessarily hear this a lot in these lectures. This thing, try this all the time. If you can use your bishop to defend your pawns, you'll be surprised how sturdy your position gets. People don't do it quite as often as they should. Do it. Try it. It's going to be fun, I promise. Okay, so takes AB as predicted. Rook a2. So Topalov is giving up on the idea of ganging up on b5. I mean, this, you could even run into shenanigans such as these. So tactics is always in the air, as you'll see. Rook a2. Now she goes bishop d4, because otherwise Topalov might start ganging on the f2 pawn. Always something you have to pay attention to because it gets really weak. Queen b8. Okay, so now we're in a pure French middle game. Black managed to trade the bishop, and you might actually notice how paradoxical chess can be. Because, you know, I've been whining about the French bishop all along till this point. And guess which pawn is not guarded now? The e6 pawn. And that's actually the craziest thing about these positions, is that the French bishop actually can be incredibly useful guarding that e6 pawn, the pawn that is supposed to be a target. So it's kind of a bad bishop, but if you lose it, that's your problem. So Judit naturally goes after it. Queen f4, rook e2. And I like these small moves. Rook e1 is something that we don't talk about quite enough. Rook e1 is that move that you want to play, always just keep with the principles of the game. Get your pieces on open files. Just line them up. As long as you're not blundering anything, this should be first on your list. So queen f4, rook e2, bishop d6. Already it's kind of getting a little uncomfortable for Judit because Topalov is immediately firing away and we're a little bit behind. So she plays g3, and that's always the thing that you have to decide whether you want to defend with pieces or whether you want to defend with pawns. But if you defend with pieces, it also becomes a question of kind of demoting your piece. Like if the knight goes to f1, yes, you're not losing, but the value of your piece becomes much lower. If you can, you want to defend with pieces though, because pawns, as we all know, they don't go backwards. Not in this format of chess. So g3, f4, very risky play by Judit, but that's Judit for you. She takes risks, and it does also have an upside. There's some control over e5, and that's actually some of the things that you can do. You can risk your king's safety if you gain something in return. Like here, you do actually control that. So queen d3 is coming in. Rook f2, queen e1. Also keeping the queens on the board, and actually it's kind of getting uncomfortable for Judit, even though Topalov had bigger initiative, but it's still fine for black, and Judit has to defend. Queen g4, some pressure here, king g2, king h1. These are not happy moves, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do, defend. Rook c2, queen e2. And she wants the trade of queens because in that case, less to defend. There's no immediate attack. This mating attack is less likely in that case, and the e-pawn becomes a weakness. Queen h3, queen e3, defending. And you may actually realize that, of course, it's good if you're good with attacking, but if you're not able to fend off your opponent's attack, it's going to be hard to improve as a player. So it's still very commendable that Judit makes sure no funny business here and also sidestepping threats of the rook. Knight f6, rook e1. But defense doesn't necessarily mean you have to oblige to your opponent's threats. Like there's also these knight g4 fork, but of course Judit calculated that, oh, this is a check. You don't have time to actually punish me. So you don't have to panic when your opponent sets up these ideas. You actually get to do these stuff anyways. So bishop f8, bishop takes f6, g takes f6. And probably Topalov thought, well, okay, if you would do this, I may as well double on the second, get all those tractors pressing, and you've got weaknesses. Black can't really be much worse. However, Judit strikes again. Judit has been on the defensive, but Judit finds a very, very nice idea here that turns tables. The game was more or less balanced, maybe tipping in the favor of Topalov a little bit. But Judit's next move actually changes the evaluation altogether. And that's why it's good to be tactically alert and doing your daily puzzles. You guys been doing your daily puzzles? So sometimes, I'm okay with sometimes.
It's not daily.
But sometimes are rookie numbers. Got to up those. Talking about that, while you're thinking, don't forget, if you're going to have a book signing by Kyla Zhao on February 28th, there'll be some chess games as well there, and also a book talk. And the book is about a young girl prodigy and her journey in chess, much like what we're going to discuss after this game with Bodhana. It's fictional, though. Just a disclaimer, it's fictional. Before you're going to ask some tough questions for Kyla, which you can still do so. If you want to ask tough questions, it's all on you. It's going to be at 1 to 2 p.m. So, whenever you're looking for tactics, what is the first thing you check? Not really. So it's not checks, not forcing moves. Obviously, some streamers think they understand things. They don't. Chat already knows the answer. Have a third guess. Have a third guess. Because obviously you're not completely off base. Sure, checks and captures. But how do you know you can capture them? Loose pieces, yes. I do think that loose pieces are way more important because checks, they're tricky. Sometimes your opponent wants to trick you. And that's why I don't like this shallow observation of checks and captures. What if it's a bad check? As we've seen, we could technically take the pawn, but it's just not good for us. It's also a capture. So you would actually look for a move that is just not good. It's better to actually go backwards and say, okay, the rook is undefended, pawn is undefended. All right, how can I go after those? Just Lover is saying that Karpov usually didn't have loose pieces. Yeah, that's the moment, you know, opposition will get tough towards your climb. And indeed, what she did. The beauty of this move is that you can't touch this because I take your rook. And if you take here, which what Topalov did, there's a nasty surprise awaiting. Oh, wait, so actually didn't take. Then I actually take here. So wrong move order. And then I will capture the pawn on e6. He actually doubled. Knight takes f6. King h8. Queen e5. This is a very, very sharply calculated move by Judit and probably missed by Topalov. Rook takes f2. But it's one thing to say, oh, I've done my homework. You also have to prove it at the board. So it's much like math. You can't just say, oh, the answer is 56. It's not how it goes. Not in chess. Not even in your math studies. Well, in this case, Hikaru would be right because it is checking time. But, you know, you still have to choose your checks wisely. And it's not like overtly just game over for Topalov. Bishop is still there guarding. And even though, you know, this one's pretty tempting, these ideas, it's not just crystal clear how you're going to win. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to ponder this. And remember, the more threats you have, the better. And remember, there's no shame in being greedy on the chessboard. Yes.
Oh wait, I've forgotten it, but I thought
Okay.
it was something that could work.
Okay, then just take your chance. I'm curious.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not.
Wait, is H the last one?
H is the. So this is H.
Oh yeah.
This is G.
H, knight H5,
Uh huh.
and then the king has to move to
G8. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the queen goes down, takes the pawn.
Here. I will take you then.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. The
This
top.
time not her. Okay, well.
No. That's.
The queen was not there.
No. Yeah. The queen E6. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna take, and then the king would
Uh-huh.
have to go back,
Uh huh.
and then
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what I was. Anyway, it ended with like the rook coming down.
Okay. So with the idea of if they block, then you would have like a back rank mate, right?
Yeah, I remember. I think the queen went to F6, and then the bishop went to block, and then the rook.
And then rook down there. So you're.
But now that the queen, now that
So yeah.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out because you're so. Yeah. Let me help you a little bit because you're not on the wrong track at all. So.
does the queen just go to G5?
Well, so first things first, your idea doesn't quite work because of what we figured out together, that you want to take the pawn, but then they trade the queen, and then you don't have nothing to mate with, right?
Oh yeah, because then if the queen just moves to the side.
Yes. So let's keep that in mind. And knowing that, where would you check with the knight?
Well, then I could take the pawn on.
On e6. So you have a check that blocks this, and you can take the pawn. You have it?
Maybe the chat.
Well, no, I mean, it is obviously a knight move because you want to give the discovered check. So you're not moving the knight here, but you move it here, right? If you consider this, and then actually it's your idea, huh?
Oh yeah.
But the queen is cut.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, and this is actually an important thing, and you did way better than you think you did. None of these grandmasters immediately see the solution. There is a bit of troubleshooting going on, or they will not admit it. There is a bit of troubleshooting going on. They will look through that, oh, I could do this way, the king gets into trouble. If I could take, that'd be amazing. And sometimes they also miss a defense. But then I think the right mode of thinking is not giving up. Because a lot of times the difference is that Judit does not give up on the idea. She continues to dig if she finds a way, a check, which would let her to take on e6. And of course, Chet says that here, then there is queen b8 mate. That's kind of what's special about the queens. They're really strong from a distance as well. And there's checkmate. So they have to go to king g8, and now, as you wanted to, queen takes e6 check by Judit. King 8. So what? So resigned here, but we're going to go a little deeper because for us, it's not quite obvious why resignation happens right now. So king g8, if queen f6, which was your idea, you are actually right that this would be checkmate. But they can still go back. Now, one thing to remember, that the queen alone cannot win, cannot checkmate apart from like a pseudo backrank mate. The queen always need a pawn, a knight, or something to help out, even a king. Even the husband is needed sometimes. But if we can't actually checkmate yet, well, there's something else that we're threatening. What else are we threatening? And that's why it's way more important to remember pieces that are hanging or attacked. The f2 rook, right? We can't quite take here, because at the end of the day, they're going to trade everything, and Topalov, the champ, is going to be up a piece. Where does this queen need to be so we can win the rook? e5 here. Which square, if you could put this queen anywhere, where does it need to land on to win the rook? d4, right? So d4, that's our goal. So we check here first. We already know that this wins. Take. You go here. It doesn't matter because you're all going to go on dark squares. And then check. If you go here, same checkmate. Or we can do your checkmate, which is actually made quicker. It's made immediately. Yep. But if you don't, and then we take the rook, and you're down like a zillion pawns, and you're going to lose the game because the knight is making a second return, and we're going to gobble up everything. It's kind of like a backward staircase. That's correct. So one of the things that I think is really exciting about this game is that Judit was defending, played some good chess, was sort of in a bind. Topalov slipped once and got immediately punished and lost the game. So, and that's actually very important. It doesn't even matter your level to kind of learn from her chess. Don't give up. There's always an idea lurking. So, let's see how the upcoming prodigy, Bodhana, is doing. She played this at a European Club Cup. That's a team championship in Europe. It's mostly teams that won their national championships. So this is kind of like a European Championship finals, practically. Nyzhnyk Maria, she's also a world champion, a women's world champion. And let's see how that goes. This happened recently because, as mentioned earlier, she's 10. As of right now, she is 10 years old. So e4, c5, and she's making the right choice, or maybe a choice of hers and the coach's. She's not trying to, again, outplay her notable opponent in the opening. She's trying to play a game and see from there. Castles and just playing very natural chess. Now, Bodhana Sivanandan, she's around 20 to 30-ish and gaining rating. So I might be saying 20 to 30, but maybe 3 days later she's already 100 points higher because she has a higher K, like K40. So a win, she'd gain 40 points. But you can kind of see in this game what 2200 plus level is like. It's also somewhat unfair because it's more of like north of 2200. It's not exactly 20. She is, I would assume she's stronger than 2200, but you kind of gauge of what she does with that level. What you need to accomplish to be feed at 2200. Just to clarify, because there's obviously US rating, there's British rating, because she's representing England. So a6 takes d4. And notice these tendencies keep coming back. She's playing aggressively because she already castled. Nyzhnyk is still behind. Her king is still in the center. In fact, that's going to play a pivotal role. So takes, knight f6. Now, this setup is famous from a couple of games. Namely, there's the game between Ivanchuk and Kasparov. Some others too, but that's probably the most notorious one. Now, I do want to ask you, though. You're up ahead. You already castled. Your opponent's behind. How can you put as much pressure on your opponent as you can? You could push the pawn, but remember, is that a trade? Yes, it is. Now, it's not necessarily a bad idea to trade, but remember this, anytime you trade, favors the side who's defending, because there's less thing to guard. Because the reason is that it's going to get easier for the defensive side, because there's less thing to coordinate.
How do you deal with, I've been told a lot, like, the idea that you open up the center if the king's still in the middle.
Uh-huh.
So how does that pair against the defending side is tight, like black is right down?
So I'm not, again, saying like e5 is not good. I'm saying it might be early, you can still improve your position. So what would be an improving position? c4. c4 is good. It's a Maroczy type of play. But is c4 trying to punish black? Not really. c4 gains control of key squares, but it's not too threatening. Very good. And that's exactly what she does. Well, what does bishop g5 want? Bishop g5 next would like to take on f6 and ruining Nyzhnyk Maria's structure. Because if you have those doubled pawns, that's never a good sign. You don't want to have doubled pawns. Bishop c6. She allows it. For some reason, she doesn't take, but it's definitely an option. Knight d2. And again, notice this healthy play. Very similar to what Judit did previously. Everything's connecting. Most of Bodhana's pieces are joining the fray, the attack, compared to Nyzhnyk's they're all kind of scattered. It's not her fault. It's the type of the position. But Bodhana is doing a good job so far. So e6, knight c4, trying to press on targets. And that's actually the other thing. If you go e5, I wouldn't have this target. So if you would go here, I wouldn't be able to sort of start attacking that pawn because you already traded it off. So a lot of the times you want to make sure if your opponent has a backwards pawn, keep it, because it's just going to make life harder for them. So bishop e7, now she takes. Can't take this way because I take the pawn. Pawn takes, rook d1. And again, just notice, these moves are not particularly difficult so far. She's just making sure all her pieces are in the game. Now that actually, by the way, doesn't negate. Sometimes the simplest moves are the best ones. In fact, there are pure players who makes only natural moves and they've been top 10 for forever. Like Mickey Adams, he's more of like these traditional, so-called positional players. So you don't necessarily have to make outlandish moves to be a very good player. In fact, I do think that it's probably a good starting point of just playing the same way Bodhana does. So b5, knight e3. This might look weird, but it does control a couple of important squares and covers any of those breakthroughs. Never forget it, if black ever gets this d5 pawn push successfully, and it becomes an ending, so the trade of queens, then black is actually going to be favored. Rook g8. Okay, so that in mind, what move would you play here for Bodhana? And again, you don't have to think in outlandish terms. A normal move is also a legal move. I know we like to sparkle you all with fascinating chess, but sometimes you don't have to do anything spectacular. Yeah, like rook e1 would also make complete sense. And it's again like a small move. You're not doing anything outrageous, but you are improving your pieces, bringing your rooks on the open files, or semi-open ones. She goes king h1, and this is actually the only moment I'll be like, I'm not necessarily happy with this move. It's not bad, but it doesn't really do that much. Probably she didn't want this pin to persist there, but it also is kind of a non-move. And it's that one of those things that you can actually try to improve in your own game too. Try to make a move with a lot of purpose. This move only is defensive in nature, and her position is not that bad that she needs to be defensive. So queen c7, but now she goes rook e1. And that actually is another sign of talent. Yeah, she might not play the best move, but she is going to do a bit of a correction and still play at least second best the next time around. And rook e1, as we said, is a completely fine move here. Long castles. Now, I keep harping on the idea of principles of the game and all these plans. Maria Muzichuk castled long, and it's a very brave decision. And this is the moment you should know, okay, wait a second. I castled short, she castled long. What does that mean to us? So it means that It's going to be an attack, right? You're going to attack me. I'm going to attack you. So, how should we do it?
I like c4.
c4, very good. c4 is very natural. a4 is the other one, but again, play to the strengths of your position, and that's a beautiful move by Sivanandan. She's just going for this. The knight is already there to support that break. And if the rook gets there, I mean, everything is lined up. It's kind of like a shish kebab. You may as well feast once that rook enters. So, of course, Nyzhnyk wants none of that. Pawn a3, very reasonable. Queen b7. And technically, you could try knight d5 here. But it is a piece sacrifice. Black is going to be up a piece. White gets a lot of pawns, but engines say, oh, it's fantastic for white. But in a human game, it usually, anything can happen. It's not like black is losing on the spot. And white is actually doing really well. This bishop is not that great. The king is very dodgy over there. So her choice of keeping it a bit more cagey is very nice, because she's not going all in, because she understands that her position is favorable. And that's actually a good sign. Many of us, including me, went all in when I already had the right cards. You don't have to go all in if the position is that good. So b3, rook c1, and she just plays it simply, going after the pawn. So if nothing happens, it's over for Nyzhnyk. So f5, knight d5. But now it's a different ball game, because if you take, you are pinned and you're losing. So bishop g5, rook c3. She's threatening to take, so she has to trade. And now black doesn't even have the bishops anymore. F takes e4. Queen e3. Just, again, piling. Notice, and that actually I really enjoy in her play here, is that she's going with small plans. She's not trying to win out. Just because she has a good position, she's building. And there's no shame in playing chess like this. And by the way, if you are capable of not dropping a piece, dropping a rook, connecting the dots, 2200 is this. Making sure everything goes smoothly, you're not dropping anything, and you follow a plan very well. Now, again, to emphasize this, this might even be higher than 2200, much higher than 2200, but this is actually the minimum you have to do if you want to be 2200 FIDE. So warning, remember. So bishop takes d5. Bishop takes d5 is not a happy move to make. And unfortunately for Maria, she can't even run there because queen and the king is aligned. You want to avoid these. And that's actually why you want to kind of drill all those puzzles. So you kind of have a feel, okay, this is where my pieces don't belong ever. Because even if you get everything right, once you run into these tricks, doesn't matter, you lose anyway. So she goes king d7, not a happy move. Now she goes queen f4. Very clever from her. Actually, she's changing track. Instead of taking the pawn, she's going after the king that's stuck in the middle. King e8, queen takes e4. And notice that when you actually position your pieces where they belong to, or they should be, in that case, every trick works in your favor. So even though black would love to take, you can't do this because your rook was where it's supposed to be, pinning the pawn, and that's why you played rook e1 like 10 moves ago. And that actually shows how good that move was. Now, people are really critical in this case. I actually say that rook e1 is probably, it could even go from like 2000, maybe even 1900, up to, it's like infinite, because it could even qualify as the best possible move here. So don't feel that, that move is not possible for you. It's possible to make good moves. Trust me. I did it sometimes. So rook g6, queen f3, just over defending everything. Rook c6, again, making her opponent's pieces worse and going after a loose pawn. So even though it's not a tactic, the pawn is still a weakness. e5, not a happy move, but she had to do something. And still, at least she's trying to close it down. Rook c1, doubling the rooks. Queen h3, eyeing both sides of the board. Queen h4, queen c4. So usually you'd want an Illia Nyzhnyk, but this is sort of like your average Illia Nyzhnyk that we kind of could have gotten in the other game too. Rook c7 is quite deadly, so Nyzhnyk has to run away from that. King e8, queen h4. Already mate is looming because the board is practically cut in half. So you can't quite come close. f6, and this is the last moment. Bodhana to move and win the game. It's not that difficult if you know how to go after your opponent's loose pieces. Queen h5, of course. I have to defend it, and I can't come closer, which is the natural thing to do. I have to bring my queen over. And the last move, even though the last, it's quite deadly. What is the last deadly move from Bodhana? So you're pinned. Once you pin the piece, you have to just pile on it. Rook g7, chat is correct. And it's not like the most usual way. Usually you attack frontally and put pressure with pawns. But here, there's just no escaping for Maria Nyzhnyk. And this is quite a big win for Bodhana because she's going to win the rook. Therefore, Maria resigned. If the king moves, I'm just going to take this. I don't mind the trades anymore. I'm up a rook. And I can also take with the rook. No matter, it is game over. Therefore, black resigned. So, Bodhana is definitely on the track. What you may notice if we compare these two games, Judit goes for a somewhat more complex chess. Now, obviously, that's not really a criticism for Bodhana. She's very young. But that's sort of the direction she needs to go to be a world-class player, to be a bit more going from simpler positions to more complex ones. Now, that's actually kind of the learning trajectory. But in order to improve something, you'll have to take chances. So thank you for taking chances and coming here for this class, and hope to see you in the future.